Welcome to the Hunter's Campfire. G'day, my name is Mark van den Bogart, hunter, fisherman, writer and storyteller. With me is Ian Hurley, technologist, hunter, hunting mentor and proud father. Together we want to help you get hunting. Our focus is helping you make the most of public land hunting right here in Australia, even if you don't live in a state where it's offered. This podcast series is all about helping you get started, helping you build your knowledge and your confidence so you can get out there and live your own hunting adventures. Now, let's get started.
All right, so welcome back. Episode 2 of the Hunter's Campfire. I think in the last episode we said that we'd try and cover a little bit of information about the gear that we take when we head out on not just our licensed hunts, but just hunts in general. I think more focused around what we're probably used to doing hunting in Queensland or out of Queensland. I'm not sure we'll touch too much on what we do further south into Victoria, but we'll certainly talk about what we do up here. So I thought we'd break this down into some logical steps, and especially if we're covering our licensing, I thought we might just kick off with what are the mandatory items that we legally have to take away with us when we go hunting in our licensed country. It's listed. I'm sure everybody knows it that's got an R license because they've done the test and they remember everything that was in the test, right? But just in case you haven't remembered it all, we'll touch off on some of those things. And there's a little bit we can talk about with each one. So I think we'll fire off with one of the first things that you have to take with you. And I get lots and lots of questions about this with new hunters and even people that have been in the field a lot, and that's GPSs. Mark, what's your thoughts? What's your go-to GPS, mate?
Look, to me, I now use the Rhino 750, I think it is, which is the combination GPS radio. And there's quite a specific reason why I went for that particular model, is that I now, because I have my younger son with me a lot more, and if I'm hunting with another good mate and he's got the paired version of that, if I say, look, my young fella's a bit tired or we've got a game animal, we're going to head back to camp, we can actually, communicate very easily via radio, or we can use a text message function that allows you to do. But it also, he knows where we are and we know where he is. So we can walk out pretty safely and he can keep hunting. But that's just a particular model that we use, or I use. Got some good friends who use the mobile phone app, the smartphone app, which the
Avenza.
Yeah. Yep, the ones that game licensing unit allow you to access. That seems to work pretty well. I know it has differing levels of quality or detail you can get. I was hunting in the Pilliga not so long ago with someone and they were using it, and look, it worked really well. It certainly gave the function of a GPS, and the fact that most people are now carrying their phones, you might actually say, well, it's a way of kind of reducing the load because the phone is doing the job of the GPS as well as you're carrying it anyway. With the radio, I always used to carry a 5-watt radio. Very rarely used it, but it was there just in case. And that was because the way I generally hunt up to, as I said, now when I'm with my boy, is I was nearly always in line of sight with someone. So we weren't spread out apart. We were close, you could see them. And especially with the blaze on, I could see friends, how close they were. So the radio was more of I suppose, an emergency tool if we ever needed it. They never needed it. So I carried a radio for a number of years and didn't turn them on. So that's probably where I'm at with those items of technology.
Yeah, well, I certainly use Avenza. So Avenza is a go-to tool for me on my iPhone. It's a great tool. It's actually a lot more user-friendly as an interface than the GPS. You've typically got a bigger screen. You can zoom in and out, pinch and touch. Everyone knows how to use them. They're great. The game licensing unit has recently changed the app that they use, and the maps that you get off the app are actually pretty poor. There's I don't know why they've done it, and it's difficult through the app to download the Avenza map like you used to be able to.
Oh, okay.
If you do it through the app, it doesn't work. What you have to do now, as a tip for the new guys or the older guys that are still struggling with it, is you go to the same R license website, but not in the app. Go to the website on your phone, and then lo and behold, there'll be a download link for the maps that doesn't exist in the app itself. Happy to answer more questions about that if people have got them, but there is a way to do it. But I use that as my primary GPS, to be honest with you, because it's easy to access. Another trick is you stick the phone in flight mode, you'll get a couple of days battery out of it, and it will still function with the GPS note on it. So all of those features work really well. It's got some great tracking features. Some people don't know that you can mark a waypoint, take a photo, and the photo sticks to the waypoint. And then when you go back and look at it, all of those features are there. So it's worth exploring. And you're right, there is a paid version as well as a non-paid, but seems to me that the main feature change between paid and non-paid is the free version. You can only download 3 maps at a time. And if you pay for it, you can get more maps.
Okay.
But you can save them offline and do all those sorts of things. So that's my go-to. I agree the Rhino is a fantastic product, but I put GPSs, if you're talking about Garmin style GPSs, into 3 categories. And when people ask me, I ask them what they actually want to do with it, because there are 3 things that you can really do with them. They all have GPS functionality and mapping, pretty much. There's a couple of them that don't have very good mapping, but most of them have great GPS mapping. Then you want to choose whether you want to track your friends,
Yeah.
whether you want to send a message to your wife and get the weather, or whether you want to track your dog. And unfortunately, you can't do all of those things on one device. And that's because they use a different radio signal and a different technology for each type of tracking. The Rhino uses the 2-way transmitter to broadcast your GPS signal, which picks up on the other Rhino, which puts a waypoint on the map. The Alpha uses a completely different antenna to track your dog, which connects to the dog's collar and can give you a couple of kilometers of range. Now, I run an indicating dog for deer hunting, so I'm more concerned about her safety than my buddy's safety, unfortunately, because I put more effort into her training than any of my hunting buddies. And they have the ability to keep themselves out of trouble most of the time. So I run the Alpha GPS to track the dog. It's a mandatory requirement in R license hunting situations. If you take a dog, you have to track it via GPS. So I had no choice, really. And they don't have a radio inbuilt version of that. So, it was one or the other, and I had to choose one. So that's the way I went. The other one that you can pick is download the weather and send a text message home, which is a fantastic feature in the InReach platform. So it's still Garmin. So it has all of the same Garmin features, but you can pick and choose. So you can pay some money. I think it's about $1 a text to send a text home via satellite. You can also call in a weather forecast, which is deadly accurate. And we've used them on the Southern Alps in New Zealand, and you can get by the hour accuracy on the weather, and it's fantastic. If I was going to the Southern Alps, would I buy an InReach? I would make sure we had one in the group. Not normally going to go there by ourselves, but you've really got to ask yourself where you're hunting and what you're going to use it for as to which sort of GPS you might choose. That's my experience with them.
Certainly. Look, I did a review on a unit called the Zolio, and I was really impressed with that. Now, what that does is it turns your phone into a satellite phone. And so that gave you a lot of those functionality that, the always contactable or able to contact people, and the weather report on your phone. So, there's an option there. There's a number of options you could go for. It really is what kind of technology you want and what you want from it. One of the reasons why I've over the years stuck with the GPS units is I've got a really bad habit of breaking phones. So
life-proof case. That's all I can say. Life-proof case.
I had one in an OtterBox and I still broke it. So, it just is the way it goes. I'm just hard on equipment. So I tend to actually leave my phone with the car and use the GPS, because but that's just me. But as I said, I've seen people use the GPS or the phone GPS system, and that's worked very well. And as I said, we did a road trip as a part of the review with the Zoleo, and we were out past, or we're on the Diamantina development road, and we were sending text messages to mates, and we're checking on the weather. So you had full, basically global coverage. And in fact, I used it on a hunt as part of the review back in July, and again, gave you full coverage. It was just a small, almost, I suppose it's showing my age, almost like a cigarette case sized item that you just paired with your phone and away you went. So that was a really interesting option.
Did that device have to be set up and pointing at the sky like a sat phone does, or can it just sit in your pack and be paired the whole time?
No, it was basically, it used the way it operated. It used a subscription model, and there was a couple of levels of subscription. And also, once you had the subscription for 3 months, you could then turn it on and turn it off. So if you were going away, you turned it on, and so on, vice versa. And all it really did is it just paired with your phone. And once it paired, that was it. So you could have it.
How did it connect? Did it have an antenna?
No, it's actually like it's hard. I wish I could. I had one.
Reason I ask,
just
Mark,
a small little rubberized armored little box.
Yeah, right. Fantastic.
Had no aerial.
I carry a sat phone. In my line of work, we have a few of them running around. So I have a sat phone in a hard case that I take with me when we go to places that have no service, like the Alps, or sometimes into the high country in Victoria and places like that. But the problem with a sat phone is you've got to turn it on and point it at the sky. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Which means you can't just have it turned on and waiting for phone calls to come in. So I usually schedule a time, 7 o'clock at night. If wives want to call, or girlfriends or boyfriends or whoever want to call, here's the number. You can call between 7 and 9 o'clock. We should be back in camp. And I just pointed at the sky, and if the phone rings, we figure out who's, as somebody said, sending dirty pictures to whom. We'll see what happens.
Well, but the Zoleo doesn't let you make phone calls; it lets you text.
Okay. Yeah, it's still interesting that it doesn't need a serious antenna.
What I saw about the Zoleo was actually it would just be handy if you did a lot of remote driving, because you can still text. You obviously can't make phone calls, but you could text, so you can still stay in contact. And it was a very simple system, so I was quite impressed with it. So there's those kind of options as well, and there is a number of products that have a similar type of, as you said, InReach being one of them, where you can. I think, is there one called Spot or something like that?
Yeah, Spot's one. It uses a different satellite system, so not to bag them out, that's probably not the right thing to do, but I've heard that because they use a different satellite system, they can take some time to pick up an SOS and send a message out. But then I hear from other people that have got them that the messages are instant, and I don't know if that's just positioning at the time and luck or not. But anyway, I wanted to pick up on something else you said about radios. And I think it's the same for my GPS. What you do with your phone about leaving it in the car, I don't leave mine in the car. I use it as a primary, but I throw my GPS in my pack, and I don't use that really unless my dog's gone missing or my phone goes flat. And I've had everything go flat on hunts before, so we'll talk about batteries later. But with the radio, I'm the same. I don't use it. I take it because you should, and I've actually downgraded my radio from one of those big unit and heavy things to a tiny little kids radio. It's about that big.
Yeah.
I bought it for a couple of kids we had running around here at some point. And here at home, they were just playing on whatever channel. And some truckie came over the radio and started giving us what for, because their kids were playing on the open channel. And I thought, far out. And I asked him where he was. He said, I'm in such and such a town. I said, man, that's 35 kilometers away from me. And I'm on these tiny little radios. Now, for me, the radio is not really used, but I keep it in case I hit the button on the Epirb and the helicopters are coming, and they will know what channel the park's on. And if I need to guide searches in at nighttime or something like that, I can have a radio to talk to them once I know they're close and you can hear them. That's really the main reason I use it.
In regards to that, that true emergency situation, for a little while now, I've been carrying, the PL, personal locator beacon, the PLBs. I've got it. There's one, an Australian one. It's literally that big, and it's got a fold out. That's the one. If you can see it on the screen, that's the one
Yeah.
I've got. One thing I did like about that one, it's a bit strange, but if you can kind of reset it if you have an emergency, and you can roll the aerial back in and you can reset it. Which, I mean, hopefully you never have an emergency, but if you do, you probably want to be able to use it again. So I went with that one as well, and I've been carrying one of them for a couple of years now, because right in the bottom of your pack, it's right there.
Yeah. I'll talk a little bit more about this one a bit later, because
Mm.
it's not on the mandatory list of things for R license hunting. I think they should be, to be honest with you, because they're a $200 item and they last for 10 years.
Yeah,
Everyone should carry one of these, but we'll talk about that in a sec. Really brief. So we've spoken about GPS, we've spoken about radio. The only other things that are really on that mandatory list that I can think of, blaze.
yep.
Everyone should be wearing blaze. And look, I've seen hunters that say, oh, I'm wearing blaze, and they tie the cap to the back of their pack and they walk around with it like that. They're not really taking it seriously. There's a school of thought that says if you can't be seen, you can't be shot. That's
Makes
the other
sense.
side of the argument. The other side of the argument is if you could be seen, someone shouldn't shoot you. Um, uh, just wear blaze. Bloody hell! It's a
Yeah,
mandatory thing anyway, and it's amazing how far you can see your friend's head
it
walking through the
is.
bush over there.
That's what, for me, the real learning for that was early days in Nundle, and we actually, a good mate of mine, Tim, and I were taking another guy out who was having much luck, and he said, "Can I join up with you guys?" And I remember him walking down this hill face, heavily tree covered, but he was coming down a hill, and I could actually see him coming through the trees. And I remember I said, that's blaze working. It's not high vis. It throws a slightly different light. And for me now, I actually don't not wear blaze. I just
Yeah, I'm the
I
same.
if I'm hunting, I'm wearing blaze. I just did. And even with when I'm on private land, the landowner says, "Oh, we could see you up in the hill," and I kind of go, "That's the idea, I'm up there."
Mm.
So I always wear blaze, but I know some people question, the ability to do animals see it or something like that. Maybe they
That's the
do, but
difference between blaze and high vis. So there's a difference between fluoro and blaze, and there's been enough research go into it for us to think. And look, I've snuck up on plenty of animals wearing quite a bit of blaze on me, and for my own peace of mind and safety, I think it's the right thing to do.
and look, to
Um,
even so, is my boys, I've actually bought them the little blaze, the fluoro work shirts,
mm,
and the
yeah,
half ones, they're orange top and blue bottom, and that's what he wears. So and again, to me, the most important thing here is about visibility. We'll figure out about the hunting. It's that making sure that he's visible and I can see him all the time. So that's what we do.
yeah.
So
He,
I've
he,
got him wearing that as well.
he might not like wearing that when he becomes a bow hunter and wants to get really, really close to animals, but that's safety is the important bit.
Yeah, well,
And
there's a
and
there's a
and
really
a
good
lot of pigs
photo.
and deer get shot at distance.
There's a really good photo of him sitting behind me as I'm lining up on the deer, and he's just sitting there watching it, and he's got his little blaze shirt on, and he's watching the deer. So, but yeah,
Mm.
that's very true, and I think he will become a bow hunter. He's already got a little practice bow, and he wants another one for Christmas, so he might become a bow hunter.
Oh, you wouldn't want to discourage that. So the only other two things that I've got on the list for mandatory that are listed when you've got to go R license hunting is obviously you've got to carry the appropriate license. If you're
Yep.
walking around with a rifle, don't forget it. It's definitely part of what you've got to carry, and your written permission. So the written permission used to have to be printed, no longer has to be. It's just got to be on your phone. But remember that often you will email that to yourself, or that written permission comes via an email to you, or you can download it. Depending on how you run your phone, you may not download that to something you can get when you have no service. You have to be able to produce that written permission. So the best way to deal with that is to get it on your phone and to take a screenshot so that you've got it as a photo and it's in
Yeah.
your photo album. Because there's been a lot of people, and the rangers have come in and spoken to them. They go, yes, I've got my permission, but they can't get it. So they got to leave their hunting zone. They got to go back to somewhere to prove it to the ranger, and that just ruins your day. And they're just doing their job. Plenty of people out there do the wrong thing. So just do that. It's a handy little tip.
Yep. I still do the printed version. I just do and stick it in my pack, and I know it's there type thing. So and
How many
away I
copies
go.
you got in the bottom of your pack, mate?
Generally, what I do is we usually burn them on the last night if we've got a campfire.
Uh,
You know, if we when we finish, it's the good. We use them for firelighters for the last night. So
that's not a bad thing to do. Well, I think that's all the mandatory stuff.
yeah, I think that's certainly for New South Wales. Victoria's a little bit different, but for probably for most people in Queensland who are looking to hunt with the R license, I think we've covered the mandatory or the requirements for it to get there and get out hunting. So I suppose the next stage is you've met the legal requirements. What should you take, or what do you need to take with you when you go away and you're actually putting boots on the ground?
The essentials next.
Yeah, look. I think essentials is. I'm interested to hear what you think essentials are because we might have different views on this. So
That's okay. Yeah, my essentials list is very short.
sure.
So okay, so I'll go back to where we were before around the PLBs or the Epirbs. I think that these are essential. They're small, they're light, they're not overly expensive. I mean, it depends what you call expensive, of course, but they're $200 or $300 now for something like that. Now,
Yeah.
this is the Rescue Me. It's the Ocean Signal PLB1. It's a
Mm-hmm.
simple unit. There it is. And to use this, all you do is pull up that antenna
Yep.
like that, flip the top over, and push the button. There's
Yep.
a test button there as well to make sure that it's working.
Yep.
Don't use that too often. It'll flatten your battery and you'll only get half the life out of this thing. Test it from time to time, of course, but that's as hard as that is. Now, the funny thing about these things is we're also a bunch of blokes running around with a thing that says, I'm stuck and I want to call a helicopter. I give up. And the biggest problem with these things is you spend the money on them, but people don't want to push the buttons. So when I'm talking to new hunters or people within my branch of the Australian Deer Association, and we're talking about these things, it brings up the second item on my essentials list, and that's first aid. So
Yep.
everyone should carry some sort of first aid kit, and that is to deal with splinters and cuts and abrasions and stings and things like that, stuff you can deal with yourself in the field. This is for anything that can't fix. And that's what I tell people. Don't try and think about, well, is it life or death now? Well, it may not be right now, but I'm seriously dehydrated. I'm at the bottom of a gully. I've been there. I haven't had to push the button because I had friends with me that got me out, but I've been in bad shape. And if I didn't have them with me, this would have been the go-to. And I wasn't that far from the track, but I knew I was in a bad way. And at those situations, you should probably use these things. It's only happened 2 or 3 times in my entire life where I know that I've been a bit out of my depth now. The dehydration in Australia is
Okay.
definitely one of those issues.
Yeah.
Another one happened in New Zealand, and we had to make a decision what we were going to do in a situation that we were in, and it all ended perfectly fine. And we all made rational decisions, but they're difficult things to make sometimes. Rational decisions after 18 hours on the hill in the sleet when you're cold and you're tired. So that calls a helicopter. You don't want to use it unnecessarily, but a first aid kit can't fix a sprained ankle. And if you can't get out of the bush and it's going to be a cold night and there's a chance of hypothermia or something like that, and you don't have other things that are going to keep you alive, do you think you're going to get out tomorrow just by resting your ankle? Maybe, maybe not. Only you're going to know that at the time. But that's my advice. First aid kit can't fix it. Push the button and don't be a hero. And the last item on my essentials kit, Mark, and I'll get you to rebut some of this if you feel like it afterwards, that goes back to water. So first aid, PLB, and water are the essential things that you've got to put in your pack. Forget the hunting bit. Like, yes, you're going to need something to shoot an animal if you're not going to spear it with a stick that you've whittled. But if you don't have water, you're not going to last. First aid kit's essential in that thing. And my recommendation, a lot of people don't use bladders anymore. Bladders became a big thing for a while. A lot of people now going back to bottles in their bag because it's a purposeful stop. I'm going to stop and I'm going to drink. I'm going to rehydrate,
Yeah.
and I know how much I'm drinking. In a bladder, you don't know. A funny story. In that one situation I alluded to a minute ago, when I got badly dehydrated, I was with one of my very good friends, and we were out hunting, and he had water, and he was a very fit guy, still is a very fit guy, and you'd take him anywhere. Great backstop. He was, I'll just give you my water, you'll be fine. And I don't know if you've ever been really tired and tried to suck water through a camelback straw.
No,
It's hard. It actually takes a lot of effort to slow your breathing enough when you're completely exerted to use a camelback straw, because you've got to get that up out of the bottom of your pack and over your shoulder. And that can actually take a lot of effort. It takes even more effort when your friend's camelback straw is cinched in his pack and it's drip feeding you this tiny little bit of hope, but it doesn't actually give you anything. Now, when I got back to camp and guzzled half a dozen beers, which was the wrong thing to do when I was dehydrated, I know this, but I wanted them anyway badly. When I finally got to Andy's pack, he had 1.5 liters of water in there. It was just cinched. So some of those things, you just don't work it out. But anyway, they're my three. Above the mandatory things, they're the three things that I think if you're walking away from your car, you've got to take that stuff.
Look, I actually, you've made me think about your approach to the locator beacon. I've never actually thought about it that way, and I'll tell you the rationale that came to me to decide to buy one. And I actually wrote a story about it for SSAA. For years, I was a single bloke, and for years I'd been out in the scrub, and I kind of thought, well, if I get snake bit, I'm sit up against a tree, and they might find my bones. That's right, they might find my bones, and that'll be it. And that's the way you go. But with family and all that stuff, I actually thought, no, I've actually got to be around. So it fundamentally changed my approach to those things. So I started to research those things, and as I said, that's how that was the journey that got me to the Garmin 750. Was the fact I went, I've got my son with me. He's young. He physically can't keep up with us. So, but I don't want to slow down my mate. So, we are now for the first time going to separate properly. Mm-hmm. So how do we stay in contact when we separate? So that became a real thing. So,
can I recommend a Garmin Alpha with a dog collar on your son?
Well, that's right. I didn't think about that, to be honest. So that's a different thing altogether. To be honest, or some kind of dongle or something like that. In regards to the water, there is actually. So I used to. I was involved in Scouts and Venturers as a young guy, especially Venturers, and I became involved as a leader as an adult. And there used to be this, or it still exists. It's a race. It's called the May Venture, and it's a hike race. And they actually put the kibosh on bladders because of that very reason, that continually, kind of sucking as you're walking along. And they found that they would empty out their bladder and they'd run out of water. Whereas with a bottle, you do actually have to stop and drink, or at least you get some idea of what's in there because of weight and, or you can literally see the amount of water in it. So there is, I think there is some rationale to that. I prefer a bladder, and I've carried them since mountain biking days. That's where I first came across them when I was mountain biking, and they were, all it was you just had this neoprene pouch on your back that had a bladder on it, and then they became more and more complex. So I certainly use one of those. I've got a 3-liter Camelback bladder. It's in a different pack, and I actually bought one for my son, a smaller one, because I didn't want to be carrying water for him. So he's got that.
Yeah.
And look, and I've been in situations. I've been in a couple of tricky situations, and one of them was actually on a hunt where a third party started to seriously get in trouble, and it was all to do with dehydration. That's where it came down. The guy was not match fit. He unfortunately told a pretty big story about his experience and what he'd known, and unfortunately, like everything, the bush kind of sorts things out pretty quickly, and it went wrong pretty quickly. And the big issue was water. And in the end, I actually was giving him creek water, and he said, "Oh, what if I get diarrhea?" And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, dead people don't get diarrhea, so drink." And so that is, water is an essential, and you can't stress it. One year we were hunting in the Pilliga, and it was late January. It was 40+ degree days. Big storms would come in through the day, so the humidity was murderous. And I shot the best public land goat, well, in fact, the best goat I ever shot in there, and it was 36-inch monster. And I dragged it out. I was so excited. I just dragged this thing out through the scrub. But when I got to the road, I went, "Oh, okay." You push yourself too far, and for the rest of that day, I was done. But you can dehydrate very quickly.
Yeah, well, mine was just a bad decision. 3 of us went to the bottom of this nasty gully, and we had only planned on a morning hunt, but we'd gone so deep, we decided to rest up and then push on for the afternoon rather than retreat back to camp and then go out again, because we covered so much country. We just wanted to see what was a bit further, and that's where the bladder got me. I'm only thinking about this now, to be honest with you. The bladder was the thing that made me come unstuck, because it was gone without me knowing.
Yeah.
I'd used it for lunch. I'd used it for drinking. I had the perfect amount for what we intended to go out for, but I didn't have enough for the afternoon. And that's just the way it was. Now, I got 3/4 of the way back fine, but I was happy to have a helping hand getting up the steep climb back to camp, because I had a headache and I was a bit dizzy, and I knew what was going on, but far out. It's a scary thing. I was just grateful that we were close enough to camp to get back to it.
I've never would have associated New Zealand Southern Highlands with dehydration. I would have thought the water would have been bubbling out of springs everywhere.
No, mate, this was an R license New South Wales block in the middle of summer.
Oh, okay. Sorry, yeah. I thought, hang on, yeah. So yeah.
Where I started to learn about water management.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so look,
plenty of stories about New Zealand, but that brings up a good topic, Mark. What I didn't have it on my essentials list, but what about water purification, or filters, or tablets?
The reality is, when we hunt in a forest, we always take in water. I do have, from my hiking days, we did some really long range hikes where you just couldn't carry that much water with you, and so you had to use groundwater. And so I've got purification systems. I've got a very nice, I think it's Mountain Designs style one, where it's a pump. It pumps through, so you're pumping it through. So, and it actually hooks up to a bottle, so it's a very good system. And I've used it extensively, or had used it extensively in the past when I was hiking, simply because that's all you had. But with the hunting, for me, now this is reflects my hunting. I'm never more than the day's journey away from the truck. So even if I'm overnighting, I can always get back to the truck. And so we take plenty of water. There's two things that we take. We take water and fuel. So if we go to hunt the Pilliga for a week, we'll take in close to 200 litres of water, and similar in fuel. And we'll disperse across the cars, and it's there in camp, because it's just that kind of big place. You're a long way from anywhere. You would hate to have to walk out of there, so you don't want to run out of fuel. So we take that with us. So I actually don't worry about purification, because I've got clean, portable or potable water that I brought from home. So yeah, we haven't really needed that. But certainly, again, depending on what you're doing, where you're going, it's an option. But
I was thinking more for that scenario where you're dehydrated and you've got to look at that creek water seriously. And that could be stagnant, and that could be anything to get some fluid into you.
Sure.
It might be something I consider. I mean, I have a Steri pen, which is what I used in New Zealand. It's a UV pen. No, it's a UV UV pen that you stick into the bottle, push the button, the UV light comes on, you stir it around, and it kills 99.9 something percent of all bugs. It's just a light UV purification. Doesn't need tablets, doesn't need filtering. Sure, you might be drinking dirty water, but the bugs are all dead. Very well
Yeah, I haven't
proven.
seen that.
The
Yeah.
thing I don't like about it is you don't know whether it worked or not, because the light goes on, then the light goes off, and you're like, well, did it do anything, or you got to trust the technology.
Yeah.
When I was a young fella and going through all of the things you talked about before, Scouts and Ventures and various different things, I just had Puritabs.
Yeah.
Iodine tablets just went in the top of your bottles, and you got used to the flavour. Even in New Zealand, drinking out of the creeks, we'd use that, funnily enough. But yeah, I wonder what I would do here.
Well, a couple of points is generally where we hunt, there's not a great deal of groundwater anyway. So you wouldn't, you'd have to run out at a pretty convenient location, because you might not be near any groundwater.
Do
And
you
for
say that
me,
about the Pilliga, maybe? A
yeah,
lot of those other ones, certainly the Nundles and Hanging Rocks and places like that have got plenty of creek systems.
but
Severn's got a major one and some good dams.
I would assume that I could get back to camp.
Yeah,
That's all.
it's a very good
That's
point.
it. That's it. I'd assume that I could get back to camp. Or if I was in a situation, it's kind of, but look, and the other option too is, for a little while, I should just take a very small burner with a metal cup in case I wanted to have, like a cup of soup type thing. And worst comes worst, I could use that to do, I could at least boil water.
Sure.
And that would help. But I never really haven't been challenged by that one, because again, the way that we're hunting the forests, we're never that far out of range. I've only ever experienced it when someone wasn't prepared physically for what we were going to do, and so it got pushed out of the ordinary.
Fair enough. What else, mate, would you consider
Look,
that needed to go on that essentials list?
I suppose, if you kind of break this down into, we've spoken about water, which obviously is the one of the building blocks here. The other one is food and shelter. So a lot of the questions that I get asked is often about what kind of tent or what kind of shelter, or should I go swag and things like that, should I take? And it's a hard question to answer without getting understanding of what the person intends to do. But I suppose one of the maxims of all of those things is, there is the unfortunate reality that is, you get what you pay for. So if you were to hunt an R license, so you wanted to get into hunting, you want to start hunting the R license, and you were going to hunt some of the big forests, and you were going to drive there, you wouldn't need super lightweight gear. Now, there wouldn't be anything wrong with buying super lightweight gear, but obviously super lightweight gear comes with a super price tag. But what I found is guys kind of gone the other way and gone the super cheap, and invariably that's let them down. So the question is that I would ask, I kind of put to people is, how do you see this playing out? Are you going to drive there? Are you going to set up a camp, and you're going to use that camp as a base and move from every day and come back to? Or are you thinking about setting up a camp and maybe then moving from days away from that kind of camp? That really, like for instance, if you were going to hunt, like a lot of guys who hunt in Victoria, they set up a base camp and then they take it from there. So it really comes down to what your intentions are about how you want to hunt, and how you envision that hunt playing out over the days. But I think the rule of thumb is, buy the best you can. So that doesn't necessarily mean buy the lightest tent, but buy the tent that's got the best components. And if you've had anything to do with tents, you know that generally the walls don't split. It's the tension points. It's where the gussets are. It's the poles. It's the crappy pegs that bend, that basically bend when they see dirt. It's all those kind of things. So spending the money and getting a better quality tent, even if it's not the super lightweight stuff, is a good investment, because You're going to use it. It's going to get used properly. So you need something to get through. Now, I have to admit that I'm a bit of a gear junkie, and my stuff is good. But it's taken me some years to get up there. So I actually do have a lightweight tent that I take
What
away
is
with.
it, man?
So I got a Mont, one of the Mont series lightweight tents, but
Australian brand.
it's one of the bigger lightweight tents because for me, again, thinking about who's going with me. But I know that if I'm going with the young guys, they're not going to hike for a great deal of distance. So even if we are going to do overnight on foot, we're going to hike. We're never going to travel a great deal of distance. So I'm comfortable carrying with what I've got. And, the answer is, oh, what if you want to go further? Well, when they're old enough to go further, they can start carrying gear as well. There's two of them, so we can spread gear around. So I bought good quality gear, but it's not the super lightweight stuff. Same with sleeping bags, sleeping mats. I know a lot of people prefer swags. I just personally have never been a swag person. And that's probably because I started by hiking. So it was always about what you had to carry. So swags kind of eliminate that. Um, though, as I've got older and softer and weaker, I do enjoy a reasonable thickness self-inflating mattress. I used to sleep on the little 3/4 things that were basically like, Vegemite toast thin, and I'd sleep on
We'll
that for
talk.
weeks on a time and kind of spring out of my back, my sleeping bag ready to go another 30 k's, but those days are gone. So I do like a bit of comfort when I'm asleep. For a while, we used to use stretchers, but I actually have gone away from those things, and I think that's another big part of this whole experience for people is that don't be scared to experiment. You'll figure out what you'll figure out eventually what the camp you want suits you. And if you've had camping experience or other experience, you take that with you. But if for those who are just starting out, you'll figure out what you do. So don't be too worried about getting it right first time. Get out there, explore. You'll realize, well, maybe that's not right, the kind of setup I want. And what I found over the years is you tend to get less gear but better gear that does more jobs. So it's the same with the sleeping. Same with you've got to sleep, you've got to obviously drink, and you've got to eat. So what does your camp kitchen look like? Again, that reflects what you're going to do. If you're going to have to carry your kitchen, obviously you want the smallest, lightest kitchen you can have. If you're driving there in a ute, your truck, and you're going to set up camp, you've got the ability to spread out a little bit and make yourself a little bit more comfortable. And that leads in itself into things like meat prep, because for me, one of the essentials is to bring back game meat. So I have a fair bit of effort into meat preparation. So I take a very, very small esky or a cartridge for myself, but I take a very, very big esky with the intention that I fill it full of meat. So I've got one of those sitting there, and that basically stays sealed until we start putting things into it. This idea of having one esky that can do two things sounds really good at home when you've got access to ice. But if you're out there in summer, you want to keep your ice as long as you can. So you don't want to be opening up an esky that otherwise that you're just going to put meat in. You want to keep it sealed, keep it closed. And, I've got friends who still do the old trick where they put the old blanket over the top of them and wet the blanket just to keep it cold, because you want to keep that meat on ice. So you've got to keep that ice together. So they're kind of the camp. Got a good camp, you're comfortable, you can get out there and hunt. So you can get out there and hunt. So that's probably the gear list for me. That's the next step down from the actual, the things you must have when you go out. So
Well, I'll trump you on the old and softness statement. The old air mattress not quite cutting it for me. I drag a camper trailer around with me. He's got a queen bed and an electric blanket.
there you go.
Well, it doesn't have an electric blanket in it. That's a lie. But it has a nice queen bed, a good fold-out kitchen, and it now has a walled tent annex that goes around it. And I've just installed a tent stove. So inside my tent, I have a hot box that has an oven that I can cook pies or pizzas or whatever I want for the camp. Now, granted, I bought this so my family could go and enjoy camping with a little bit of luxury. But I do a lot of mentor hunts with the branch, with the ADA branch. Like this weekend, we're going away with 8 of us. We got 4 mentors and 4 mentees buddied up, and it becomes the communal camp that people can use the kitchen and make a coffee and do different things. But if I was to go to the Pilliga, it would be in tow behind the Ranger. It certainly is when I go anywhere else, Nundle or Severn and what have you. But if I'm going and ranging, like we took it to Victoria, and it was a great base camp in Victoria. But yeah, you then range away from that for maybe a night or two, and then you've got to be set up for it. And I agree that the equipment is important. Buying the best you can is important, but I don't think you should be scared of buying secondhand when you're getting into this and figuring it out, because there are gear junkies like Mark here and myself, where I've got everything from the single cocoon tent that failed because it was made in China for small Asian people, not for big Kiwi lads. I can't even roll over in it without dragging the whole tent with me because it hits my shoulders. So that was useless. I've tried hammocks. I've got the Hennessy Hammock set up, which I thought was going to be a beautiful way to do it. But man, if you don't get that right, you're cold at night time. So by the time you have the hammock, the undersling, and the bits and pieces that go with it, it's the same weight, if not heavier than a good quality small tent, which is more versatile because you don't have to go and find trees. And I can tell you don't find them on the mountaintops everywhere you go. So it's a bit of a pick and choose, like you said. What do you want to do? You need to gear up for that. Start somewhere. I am a fan of the swag, even when we do some very long trips down to Victoria where it's a 14 or 15-hour drive to where we're going, and I tow the camper trailer, but I don't set the camper trailer up when we stop in the middle of the night. I throw the swag underneath it and I just sleep on the swag. And there's more than one occasion where you just do an overnight that the swag is quite a good way to go. But it's bulky, it's big, and if it's not in a base camp, it's virtually useless. You're definitely not going to be dragging it around on your shoulder through the bush as you go from camp to camp to camp. So 100% agree with that. But I find some of those little luxuries are nice when you go back to camp.
Oh, most definitely.
If you've got cold beers, if that's what you want to do when you have a relax around a campfire, then that's nice. But you're right, separating that ice. You've got a fridge and an esky. We sort of run a fridge and 2 eskies. One's the meat esky, one's the in and out for drinks thing that's gonna lose all of its ice a lot faster. But you've got to learn to manage that, and that's trial and error, because I'm sure that there's more than one of us that have gone home with meat hoping like heck that it doesn't spoil because your ice has disappeared faster than you hoped it to be. So all important.
That's for sure. I know most eskies got multi-day ratings, but to be honest, I've never really had anything that stretches that long, so you have to be very careful for it.
Buy block ice instead of crushed.
Block ice, and you still can buy dry ice too. That you've got to order it. One of the guys I hunt with used dry ice. It does last for 5-6 days, but you've got to. You literally got to order it and pick it up. But that's options. Look, I mean, I think I no doubt agree that you have to find your level of comfort. And that's what it is. So you've got to find those things that that this is an enjoyable activity. This is not trial by fire or something like this. This is not how hard can you make this?
Yeah, that's right. How much of a man am I?
That's right. Well, how much grief can I put myself into? Maybe that when you're 20s, that's what you're part. But I know maybe not. But the thing is, I want to hunt as much as I can. So I want the things that help me to hunt, comfortable camp, good sleep, food. I want them to be right, because that translates into me being, more energy, better sleep, better turned on out there and hunting. Because when we go our license hunting, we hunt sun up, sundown. We come into camp late after dark, so I don't usually have a grandiose meal. I have a good meal, but I have a simple meal because I'm going to be cooking it in the dark after a day out on the trail. I tend to take food that I can eat while I'm moving because I don't want to go back to camp at lunchtime to stop to go back to camp, to go away from hunting to eat. I'll eat on the move, but that's the approach that I take. So I want everything to support me being hunting. And that's
Sure. And
probably why
there's,
my
there's
gear
time and
selection
a place.
is that.
Yeah. There's time and a place for going super light. You know, some of the trips we've done to New Zealand, you know, we've sought the advice of some of the search and rescue people when it came to buying tents. They recommended to us that we buy the MacPack Minaret tent.
Yeah.
It's a 1.5 man tent. It's got a vestibule for your bits and pieces in front. You know, I'm a big guy. There's enough room for me and rifles and boots and everything smelly that came off you at the end of the day to, you know, stick down the end of your tent, things like that. But we got smashed one night by this most incredible storm I've ever been in, and we were camped on a ledge. Right, the hill came down here. We were on this ledge. It was a bit of a tarn, and then off it went, and we were camped on the edge of this ledge here, with a little bit of a rise between us and falling over the end. And that thing came down so ferociously. We were almost giggling with hysteria as we got belted that night, and all of our tents were in a line along here. And we knew the storm was coming because the inReach told us it was coming. And we got down and we triple pegged everything, and we put rocks all around our tents to hold everything down. And those MacPack Minarets did not move. It felt like you were going to get lifted up and just thrown across the cliff. But they didn't come out of the ground. Some of the other tents did. Most of them survived pretty well, to be honest with you. There was the Alps Mountaineers brand tents that were there. I think one of them got nailed a bit more than ours, but mainly because it was more like a 3-man tent. I think it had a bit more height and it caught a bit more sail, things like that. But yeah, seek the advice of people when you're going to go and do some serious stuff, because there's some definite gotchas in there. One thing you said a minute ago about looking after the meat. What's in your pack? Right, so you've walked in, you've found your game, you've shot it, it's on the ground. What are you pulling out of your pack next?
Sure.
What have you got in your processing kit that people should consider?
So my processing is a two-parter. So I have, so what's in my pack is usually there's obviously a knife. So I usually carry a couple of knives. I got a small, very lightweight knife that actually sits on my bino harness. So I've got that handy. And then I usually carry a heavier, more substantial knife in my pack. And that knife is bundled up in a meat bag, one of the meat backpacks. So backpacks specifically designed to haul meat. And there's also a stay sharp sharpening little sharpening gadget there with it. So when we take meat, after shot an animal, it's on the ground, what we'll usually do, depending on the time of the year and where we're at, we'll either try and take the whole animal, or we'll go, no, take pieces. So if it's cold weather and we can drop the guts out of it and leave it for retrieval later, we'll do that. Usually we'll put it up in a tree. So we'll gut it. So we'll drop the guts out of it, ring it, throat it, get it up in a tree to let it cool down. If it's hotter area, we'll go, okay, look, take bits. So usually the bits you always take if you're going to take meat, unless depending on how good the other person's shot placement it is. So obviously not wreck meat. So your rears, because often things like goats don't have as much front as they do rear. So the way they're built, the hindquarters is much better than the forequarters. So we take hindquarters and things like back straps. And of course, there might be a head involved in this too. You might go, well, that's a good billy, so I want to take the lot. So that goes into the meat bag. And so then what I do is the backpack I get on, I'll kind of do a bit of a swap. So I'll put the backpack I've got on my front, put the meat bag on my back, so I can still walk out with the rifle in my hand, and we'll walk out that way. And I just break it down to major components. I won't
Mm.
even usually take the skin, the hair off it, the skin off it, because I think that protects it while it's,
It
the
does,
best
yeah,
way to protect
100%.
it.
Yeah.
So when we get back to camp, then we actually have the setup for meat processing. So I'll have different kinds of knives. And in my camp knives, I actually have a plastic box which I call my kill box, and in it are, you know, reasonable quality butcher's knives.
Mm.
The plastic handles, what a butcher has in, what you'll see in a butcher shop, a steel, and then all the things like calico or plastic and or things to bag it up to get it on ice. And that's the way that we've done it for a while. And when there's a couple of us, what we'll do is when we get the meat back, we'll actually have a bit of a, not working beat, but we'll have a process. We'll process everything once to get it on ice. So there's really a two-part step for me. And if it's, if it is cool enough and it's the right weather, we'll leave it there for a while and come back for it. If it's not,
Mm.
we'll go, okay, we've got this animal. We've got to now get back to camp or get back to the truck, depending on where we are, and get this on ice as quickly as can. So it's a process of elimination based on your environment, how far away you are from camp or the truck, what kind of animal you take, and so on. So, and I'm very much for taking meat. So even if,
Mm.
you know, even if I'm gonna, even if it's for the dog, I want to take something. To me, it's part of the process. So I'm going to look at that animal and make a decision. Yes, I'll take meat off that animal. No, I won't. Um, so, for instance, one year we were hunting in the Pilliga, and it was the year that we got the most pigs. It was also the year that I never took a scrap of pig meat. You
Mm.
just looked at that thing and said, I don't even want to touch that thing. That is not a healthy animal. Um, Other years, literally, I remember one of the first pigs I ever shot in Nundle, mate, it looked like it come off the farm.
Mm.
It was just black. Other than the fact that it wasn't, rosy pink, it looked like it was a farm animal. It was so healthy. And I recently shot a pig up in the Brisbane Valley. It's in fact the biggest pig I've ever shot. I'm pretty sure it was my first real tunner. Again, you kind of think that's like it's that's what KR Darling Downs have on the in the meat process.
Mm.
So it all depends on the environment. Deer is a bit different. Usually deer, I have heard people tell me that they've had experiences where they've seen very poor deer. I've never seen a very poor deer, and I've never seen a very poor goat, but I've also heard people say that at times they've seen goats that have been in very poor condition. But generally those two are pretty safe animals in terms of meat. But if you follow things like hygiene, say for instance, for years I used to take those latex gloves.
I still do.
I mean, I just break them. I'm like, a teenager with a condom. I'm all thumbs. So I now actually just have these big black bloody heavy gloves that I know I can get my maulers in that I won't split,
Uh,
and that's what I use. They're like dishwashing gloves.
yeah,
Lost a bit of
right. No, the
dexterity, but they're
ones that I
strong.
use
They
these
don't
days are,
break. I've got no problem getting them on. They
yeah.
don't matter if your hands are a bit sweaty or anything like that. They go straight
No,
on.
that's
So
no
I
problem.
use those.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing you raise. I've always taken a plastic bag, like a little Ziploc bag with, 6 pairs of rubber gloves, latex gloves. And that's not to keep my hands clean. For me, that's to keep the meat clean. If you're in
Yeah,
the gut cavity and something's busted, once I'm dealt with that, I can take them off and I've got clean hands to deal with the meat. I can put another pair on if I want to. I always do that. I always remember that, and I've found that the latex gloves are a good idea. On the same, I carry a bit of rope and a plastic gimbal, because I prefer to to gut out and prep the animal, whether I'm carrying it whole or in pieces. I prefer to do it in a tree than on the ground. It's just a lot easier. Gravity helps you with that process, and you're not mucking about with it so much. But there's not a lot else that I carry in it. And I only carry the one knife. I try and get people not to carry multiples of everything, because you're often hunting in pairs and your buddy's usually got the same things that
yeah,
you have. The other thing I suggest that people do is get all that crap off your belt. You're not Rambo and you don't need to quick draw on anyone. Put it in your pack, get it out of the way. It just gets caught up on stuff. It's really not necessary to have all sorts of stuff hanging off your belt. Sure, you've got bino harnesses and things that you can attach stuff to for quick access, but I've always found that people get stuff stuck everywhere, and that can be a bit of a drama. One thing that I've recently added to my kit bag, and I sort of emptied my pack as we were talking about this, that not a lot of other people carry, but I think they're a great idea.
Yeah, no, I carried secateurs for donkey's years.
Man, when you go into a bit of new country and you don't know where you're going, and you come across some really thick bloody fire regen or something that you can just, especially if you're going into an area where you find some good game or some good sign and you want to go backwards and forwards into it, you can cut yourself a nice quiet track and you can be in and out of there silently every day rather than bush bashing. It's such a good idea. And the other reason I do it is for the dog, because what I stand on to get out of my way becomes her obstacle. If I'm trying to make a track into a nice area that we can sit over and glass over, I try and cut that out of the way so she doesn't have to go through the blackberries that I've squashed down into her path. But anyway, just something else that came to mind.
I carried a set of shears for years, but what I've gone to more lately is I've got this. It's very good quality Japanese fold out little handsaw. And the reason I went for it is, one, it does help with things that like cutting timber, but we've started, especially we do a trip every year where we go for fallow and we go for meat, and we'll take, some years we've brought back, the equivalent of 2 whole carcasses. And so I actually use that saw to go through pelvis as well. So I kind of use it for both jobs, and you can use the secateurs to go up through the brisket and open them up as well if that's how you like to do it. So yeah, they certainly are a very handy thing. With stuff on your belt, what I find is one of the problems with people wearing stuff on the belt is not so much it's on their belt, but the way it's attached, it's far too flappy. And that's what gets caught on things. And the other thing is, even if it doesn't get caught, it's noisy. It's like this flap, 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 flap. Every step, flap, flap, flap. Bang, bang, bang. So I think when it comes to things like stuff on your belt or wherever it is, think about how it's secured and does it make a lot of noise or not. So you can have it on your belt if it's secure. If it doesn't move, it doesn't get caught. But if it's flapping around, I totally agree. You've got to make sure there's no issue having the knife in your pack. And it's a funny thing, people say, and generally people who don't hunt go, oh, you're hunting pigs, do you carry a knife? And I go, no, I carry a 308. If I can't kill that pig with a few shots of a 308, I'm not going to then rip out the knife and go.
Yes, have another go, buddy.
Tuss the blade with it. I'm going to shoot it. It's what I'm going to do first and foremost.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep shooting it until it's on the ground. So if my shooting comes down that I need a knife, then I probably need more range time, not a knife. So it's a funny thing.
That's fair enough. Other than the other thing, I mean, there's a few things we haven't covered, which are the basic, what are you hunting with? Obviously we're going to be carrying binos. Some of us will carry rangefinders and some of us won't. It'll depend on a number of things, and that's going to be the type of country you're going to. A lot of close quarter stuff, you just don't need it. Inside 200 meters, you don't need it. You just don't need it. But if you're going to go and do some big open top stuff in Victoria or in New Zealand, you're absolutely going to need it, and you want to be prepped for that longer distance shooting as well. But that's certainly in the pack. There's lots of other little bits and pieces that sort of go in mind, but nothing that really springs to mind that's sort of mandatory. You really should have it in there. People will put little bits and pieces in their pack that they want to take, but I think we've covered the majority of things that I think are really important.
We're going to, to me, rangefinders, binos, optics, rifles, that's where the real interesting stuff starts to happen. And I was worried that if we started there, we'd never stop talking about it. So I certainly wouldn't mind discussing that. Before we get there, I think one of the other big things that people seem to really spend a lot of time chewing over is clothing. Now,
Good point.
one of the reasons why I think a lot of people, well, look, camo is an obvious choice, but what I've found that with a lot of the camo gear, there is certainly quality issues within a lot of the camo gear, and again, so a lot of the high end stuff, it's more like it's I think the benefit of, again, spending money on your gear in terms of your clothing is you actually get better quality gear that's designed to spend longer time in. It's got, wicking, it's got heat dispersal, or for instance, when we go down south in a couple of months, all my winter gear is all Kiwi gear. It's all Kiwi gear because, they make good winter gear. So I think clothing, it's not so much about what is the best camo pattern, is what is the best clothing for the environment you find yourself in, because I very rarely wear camo. I just wear good quality outdoor gears, which generally happens to be hunting clothing. So the
Yeah.
closest I have to camo is olive drab or green. And
Mm.
not even all my stuff is even green, but that's generally where I find myself. Um, Conversely, when I'm hunting anywhere in summer, most of my stuff isn't hunting gear. It's simply really lightweight workwear in many instances, because it's hot, it's dusty, it gets beaten up. There isn't any way of getting around the heat. So things, so I wear light cottons and things like that, which are often workwear more, or work or fishing wear type gear rather than the camo, because generally most camo is built for not cooler climates, but certainly not stinking hot weather.
Mm. I agree with the point that like if you're buying hunting clothing, you're buying something that's fit for the purpose that you're
Yeah,
actually trying to use it for. So I find that if you're going to go and try and find the right type of pants or shirts or what have you to go into the bush and deal with those conditions, it's going to be a hunting line of clothing.
mm,
A lot of the mountaineering clothing that you'll find, it's really good for mountaineering, but they're
yeah,
probably not bashing through the same sort of stuff that we
no,
are and putting it through the paces like we are as well. Some of the military spec stuff that they have, it's really heavy. It's made out of some really crazy thick material. It's got to last a lot longer again. So they put their stuff through their paces. So a lot of people sort of lean towards that. I personally don't. I find that pick a brand, sample it, borrow some stuff off your mates. I pick a brand because it fits me. Yes, it's the right technical product to do the job, but out of the major brands that I've dealt with before, one fits me particularly well. It's made well, it's consistently made well, and the sizes don't vary. Sometimes you can buy a pair of pants and you buy the same pair of pants that doesn't fit you.
yeah,
Um, a good quality brand, they have quality control over that. And let's face it, as much as we like to support our local shops, they don't always have a good range of product.
no,
Australian shops aren't huge, especially in the regions. Some of the big ones in the capital cities, maybe. But if you go to New Zealand, you go to a hunting and fishing store, you just sit there and you go, oh, look at this. I'm in Utopia. It's what an amazing place I've walked into. But Australia just doesn't have the same sort of thing. So
no,
once you get used to your brand, you're typically going to go and buy that stuff online. And when I want to go and buy another pair of pants, I know the size and whether it's shorts or longs or winters or what, it's going to fit and I can be comfortable with that. So that's sort of how I pick mine. I have found that some of the brands do have a really good summer range of equipment. But it's also, of course, it depends what you're doing. I tend to do a lot more fishing in summer than I do hunting. I had a fun experience up in the Northern Territory with buffalo one year, and it was stinking hot. And I put my tail between my legs, come back, and said, "Stuff that! I'm going fishing next year." And I keep my hunting for the cooler months. But that's me. And everyone's a little bit different. And again, they'll pick their gear to suit themselves. But sample it, see what you think. But
see, in summer, like, so I've been hunting basically every couple of weeks for the last 2 months. and we're starting to cool off now. But for me, a big part of my summer hunting attire is actually geared towards sun protection as well. I'm
Yep.
sick of getting bits cut out of me every year when I go to the dock on the yearly visit. So I now wear full fingered gloves. I always wear a long shirt, buttoned down. I don't roll sleeves up anymore, and it's a fishing shirt. So it's a green or olive fishing color, but it's a fishing shirt. So it's very lightweight. As I said, I usually wear like a work style pants because you're bashing through scrub. Boots, gaiters, neck protection, and the neck wrap, and a hat. That being said, on the very last hunt I did, which was only last Friday, it wasn't cold by any means, but it was certainly cool for up here. And I was walking through the wet grass, and because it's always wet, and about half an hour in, I went, I might have to start thinking about, the getting the winter gear out there. I'm just starting to feel it on the wet grass. And by the time I got back, because it's a small block, so usually, I hunt it. The way I hunt that one is I do split it between a morning and afternoon, and after 10, 11 o'clock, I threw my gear out to dry, and it does dry because it still warms up during the day. But that was that challenge. But if you're somewhere like, the New England or lower into Victoria, you are hunting completely different environment.
For
And
sure.
you need to really give yourself consideration for your gear there. You're going to put it into a much harder, harsher environment in terms of the cold. So, for instance, as I said, our trip's coming up, our first real winter trip's coming up in the beginning of July. It doesn't snow there, but it can feel like it's going to snow. It gets that cold for us. So all my gear then for that trip is basically dedicated hunting gear, because that's what it's fit for purpose. And there's a particular brand I like. They make really good gear. As you said, what you get is good quality stuff. It works very well. So that's my winter. So for me, really, the hunting gear comes out in winter. During summer, I tend to get away with more, outdoor summer gear. So that's certainly a consideration. But that being said, there's always boots. In fact, I think I've got like 12 pairs of different types of boots and 2 pairs of shoes. I either wear boots or I'm barefoot. I don't very rarely wear shoes, so I always hunt in boots. I've tried synthetic boots. I've tried really, really good quality, well-respected brand synthetic boots, and the circle always comes back to quality leather boots. I just can't
A
see.
leather hiking boot, or you're talking about
Yeah,
a work boot?
there's a couple of brands in the hiking boot. The Italian hiking boots like Zamberlan, I tend to come back to if I can find them on sale, or I can find them. And in fact, one of the big outdoor stores here has now started carrying them. I'll go and buy a pair, and because they will last me for years. They fit me. Again, it's fit, it's finish, it's built for purpose. They are hiking boots. They can be, they are hard soles, so there is that noise issue, but I mean that you just have to be aware of that. I did for the summer. I bought a pair of American hiking boots, or what they call upland boots, and they're no good on hills, but they're fantastic for hot weather because they're not insulated. They are leather, but they're fantastic for hot weather. They're ripple soles. You can sneak around those things, and they're incredibly comfortable. So that's kind of like summer or winter. I wear the more traditional hiking boots, and I always wear gaiters as well.
Yeah, I'm the same. I had a pair of I've had a number of different pairs. I've always leant towards military boots, like the Danners and things like that.
Yep.
But I had an argument with my last pair of Danners when the sole fell off when I took them to New Zealand. They were well made for Australian conditions, less well made for the New Zealand ones, so they didn't survive there. On one trip, ended up in a pair of boots that came from an Australian brand, hunting brand. I'd say they were rebadged, these boots anyway. They went to New Zealand and didn't return either. Sadly, on the top of one of the Southern Alps trips, I walked the sole straight through. I could see the steel.
That the steel plate they put through them.
Yeah. So that was the end of those. And I've ended up, one of the other guys went over there the same trip, and he had a brand new pair of lowers, and they came back looking like new. Didn't have a mark or a scratch on them, and I went straight to the shop and bought the same pair of boots.
Yeah.
I've had them for probably 3 years now, and they're a great boot, but some don't like them, some do. They've got to fit your foot, and lowers can be a challenge for the wider foot, but if you take the time and heat them up and get them right, then you'll have a good boot, in my opinion.
So when I was in the UK years ago, I bought these incredibly well-made French boots, and they're actually like the 10-hole. They're quite a long boot, but they had a squeak in them, and they're notorious for it. But they are fantastic for England. When you're in mud, you're going through water.
Yeah, not going to hear it.
When you're in England, you're wet. Okay, it's just like you might as well be scuba diving. You're wet.
Different kind of wet.
The time.
Yep.
All the time. You can't escape it. You can't you're not like, oh, we'll walk through this, it'll be wet, then we'll dry out. No, you start wet and you'll stay wet for the day. And so, I actually leave them over there. They're over there. I leave them over there because it was no use carrying them back and forth on the plane in the end, but they are perfect for those kind of conditions. So fit for purpose is a real important thing. And, and those really good quality hiking boots like Lower or Mindel, or as I said, I prefer the Zamberlan. They're an Italian boot. They just seem to fit my foot very well. I think I'm on my third pair.
Look, and I think
the last 15 years or so.
That's super important. I mean, all of this, the theme through this whole process tonight has been fit for purpose. Where are you going? What are you doing? Buy the right product for the right purpose, for what it is that you think you're going to be doing. One of the messages, we had a guide one year over in New Zealand, and he said, you've got to have the equipment that you're comfortable with, that makes you feel comfortable, that gives you the right sleep, that makes you feel okay after 8 hours on the hill for the day. That stuff enables you to hunt. Poor quality gear, you'll spend your entire day just surviving. And if you're just surviving, you never get the time to hunt and enjoy the reason that you go there to start with. So it's really important to get that stuff right.
Yeah, like there's a particular American brand of pack that I've just bought for the first time, and the last 2 months I've been wearing it between 7 and 8 hours a day, all day, and just basically usually, 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours in the morning, a break, then 3 to 4 hours in the afternoon. And I must admit, it is a very good pack. Is
it a pack frame system?
It's one of the internal systems. So it's actually you could kind of flex it to suit yourself. But what I like about it is that it's built for a taller person. So one of the problems I've always had with smaller packs, as in literage, is they're also a bit shorter. Sure. So I could never get the real benefits of having a hip belt.
Yeah.
Because the distance between shoulder and hip on the pack was too small, whereas this I can actually use the hip belt properly. I can adjust the shoulders, so then you can use the sternum strap and stuff, and it all comes together. And I'm carrying more gear now because I'm doing video, so there's a fair bit of gear in it just even for a small. And it's a pleasure to walk. You just put it on, and the other thing
comfortable.
Is, because it's got that stiff, and I actually used it in another situation when I first got it, because it's got that very the internal frame, and it's a bit taller. I've used it as a rifle rest. I've taken it off, spun it around, and put it in front of me, and sat behind it and use it as a rifle rest. So it's a very, very good pack, and again, it's that fit for purpose. But it's taken me a number of packs to get there. And that's one of the problems, or maybe it's not a problem, but that's one of the journeys of this is getting the gear that really suits you, because you kind of determine when you first start, you kind of think, what's this going to be about, or you get input from various people and they influence you, but you actually need to get out there and start doing this and learn along. And I think that leads really well to the last thing I want to talk about, which is, the really important stuff, which things like rifles, scopes, and binos, because for most people, it's the big investment. And unfortunately, a lot of people get it wrong because, like anything, it seems that it's really affected by fashion. And so people go, oh, this guy's carrying that rifle or this type of rifle, so that's the right rifle for me, and away you go. And so, and look, I've been hunting on branch hunts and things like that, where God love him, the guy's gone out and spent a lot of money on a very, very fine piece of kit, but it's completely inappropriate for what he's going to do. He's basically got himself a long range target rifle to walk the forest and Underl. Now, you can do it if you're incredibly fit and you like lugging around that, and the things come together for you. But a hunting rifle is one thing, a target rifle is another thing, and no matter how you try, it's pretty hard to get them both to line up.
I had a giggle one mentor trip. I had a young hunter come along, very nice fella, and he showed up with this target rifle, and man, it must have been 12 kilos of gun.
Yeah.
And I said, you're going to carry that? He goes, it's the only one I got, man. I said, well, that's okay. We'll make it happen for you. But man, at the end of that trip, he was looking for an ultralight carbon stock fluted barrel. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure he's got one now, but that's all right.
And I think the thing about a rifle is you can build a rifle to your requirements. So as long as you start with a good quality base rifle, a good brand, good action, you can build it up. And in fact, that's what I've done with every rifle I've ever owned. I do this thing. I buy a new rifle and go, okay, I'm not going to customize it. And 3 years later, I've customized it because, and even with like my Scout rifle, I said, no, I'm buying this thing as is. That's the idea of it. It's just a beater. Trouble is, I kind of, became very fond of it, and then I started spending money on it, and then I did customize it. I think where you can't customize and you have to get that purchase right is with optics. Spending the money on optics is I can't stress out how important I think that is. So for years I hunted with Loophole, and that fantastic brand, make great stuff. There's no doubt about it. And I started with the VX3 when they were VX Roman numeral dash 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 before it was 3. So I've got some old VX3 scopes, and they are purpose-built American hunting scopes, great quality glass, great components, got the lifetime guarantee. They work really well. But unfortunately, there's a guy who used to work for Queensland Gun Exchange who now works for Beretta by the name of Scott Allen. And one day Scott Allen said to me, mate, I'll do you a deal on this Swaro scope. And that was the end of it for me. In a way, I wish he never let me in on that secret, but he did. And I personally would have argued that there was no difference between a good quality Loophole and a good quality European scope, or the difference was negligible, and you weren't going to tell the difference. Yeah, unfortunately, that story didn't play out. As soon as I picked up that Swaro, it was like, okay,
is that right?
Yeah, okay,
So
so
you're on the Swaro train. It's an interesting one because I had this debate with one of my branch members and a good friend of mine, and he is. I'm pretty sure he got his first Swaro on his most recent rifle, but he had my Opta before that, and that's pretty nice glass as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
To be fair, and I think a few of the guys in the branch have got his hand-me-down my Opta glass, and that's pretty good. But I was in the market for my next fashionable rifle. I'd lugged around a 270 Remington 700, which was the first rifle I ever bought for shooting deer, which did the job for quite some time for me. And look, I'm not a gun enthusiast. It's funny to say that as a hunter. For me, it's a tool. It needs to be a walking stick, a shovel, and a rifle, and all of those things at the same time. I'm certainly not buying good wood. The timber is not important to me. I'm buying a synthetic stock. It needs to be hardy. It's going to get scratched up. It doesn't get treated very nicely. And when I gave it to my gunsmith, he said, I'm pretty sure you bought half of New Zealand back under that stock, because the shit that fell out of it, I now get my rifle serviced by him once a year, because bugger if I can clean it as well as he can. But anyway, I was in the market for a scope to go on my new rifle, which was a Tikka T3X and 7mm Red Mag. And everyone was telling me to go Swaro, get the best glass, but I just didn't want it. I had a different need. Now they'll tell me go the Swaro. It's got the crispest glass. You'll get the best light capture. You'll get that extra 5 minutes right on dusk. No other glass is going to give you the same thing unless you're going to go to thermals. But I can't say I've ever been in a situation where I've not been able to shoot an animal because it wasn't light enough. Because typically what you're seeing through your naked eye is darker than what you're seeing through your scope, because your scope picks up more light collection.
Yep, yeah, the light transmission, yep.
And I've always had a theory that is, whatever you do, make sure your binoculars aren't as good as your scope. Because if you can see them through your binoculars, but you can't see them through your scope, you're going to kick yourself all the way home. So just make sure if you can't see them through your binos, you're not going to pick your rifle up and see it anyway. That was one theory. But what I was trying to do is I do a lot of mentoring. And by that, I mean I take new hunters on their first expedition, if you want to call it that, to shoot their first deer. And I help them with that process. I do quite a few people a year through our branch. And I needed to be the backstop. So what that meant was, in a lot of cases, the mentee lines up and you coach them through the process. And if something goes slightly wrong, then you've got to be quick to act to finish that job for them. Having better glass at night in low light wasn't going to do it for me. I actually wanted the range finding scope. I went to a Sig Sauer scope that had a rangefinder BDX system, so that I can range it and it auto adjusts the holdover point for me, so that I can just quickly acquire a target at a distance. And for me, that was important, because I found that I had let more animals go at distance because I didn't want to take a 300-meter shot or a 350-meter shot, because I wasn't sure of the judgment of that distance. And even if I was, there's a bit of work to be done to make sure that you're comfortable with ballistics to start with, reading your charts, changing, and there's a bit of mucking around with it. And there's zero stops and there's all of those great things that you can get to make sure that you've got a scope that's capable of that. But this was fast. Zip, boof, off you'd go. And it was done. And that for me was a feature that was more important than better glass or more light. But that's horses for courses, right? There's nothing wrong with Swaro. They are brilliant. And I see they've brought out a range-finding scope. So I could be in trouble.
The thing with, I think the interesting thing, certainly for me, is that, so I've got a Swarovski scope, but I actually don't like the Swarovski binoculars for some, or my eyes don't like Swarovski binoculars. I actually seem to be better suited to Leica binoculars in terms of optically. It's fun, you're not going to like my rifles, because my rifles are not like that at all. I do.
I'll love your rifles. I just know they're not for me.
I spend a lot of money on timber. I do spend a lot of money on, I have invested a lot of money that I'll never get back on my left-handed rifles. And people say, oh man, that thing's, and I said, look, if I had a Porsche, I'd drive it like it's a Porsche. So just because it looks pretty doesn't mean I don't use it right. And in fact, I actually think that's part of. I'm completely comfortable using my rifles in any situation, because they're in the end they're kind of built for me. So I've got them down to me. And with the Swarovski optics, especially the scope, there's all that argument about light transmission and that does there is some value in that when you think about most European countries have a very, very start and finish time on light, so that those last minutes are really important. But what I find it is it's that ability to bring that scope up to your eye and see that incredibly good picture very quickly. So strange enough, I tend to not have high magnification scopes. I tend to shoot on somewhere between 2 and 3 power. I'm very much about a low magnification. I want a bigger picture. And so, for instance, my Swaro scope that I went through is only 1:6. It's a small scope. I mean, it's a smaller scope. I run a 2:10 on my 30-06, but get past 4. The only time I ever crank it past 4 is when I'm at the range and I'm shooting paper. I actually want to, have that ability to see where shots land.
That's indicative of your style of hunting, Mark, isn't it?
I think it is.
State forest hunting, it's close quarters.
That's it. To me, and like a friend of mine, we've actually just put a red dot on his because, most of that shot is under 100 meters and it's shot within messy scrub and the animal might be moving or it's about to move. So it's a fast acquisition. That being said, I mean, you don't need to spend that, but I can't honestly say that, there's no difference. There is a difference. It is. There is a massive difference. The only brand that I've ever seen, I've encountered, and I've reviewed them a lot, and I'm an unabashed fan, is Steiner. They make some stuff that is very reasonably priced, and you get a lot of bang for your buck. GPO is another one, but GPO stuff is it's very, very good quality. I've actually bought a pair of Gpo binoculars when I was overseas because I was so impressed by these little binoculars. But a lot of their scopes are higher magnification, bigger front objective. They're, again, a European flavour. If they brought out something a bit more, the smaller magnification, I'd probably be more inclined towards them. But they are very good. But I find with the Steiner, especially currently in their binocular range, their older, cheaper range, which is the Predator, man, they are good binos for the price. They are really, really crash hot. So, and I tell people say, "Oh, should I buy this?" I say, "Man, if you can find a pair of Steiner Predators, grab them because they are fantastic for what they are." So, I mean, there is that kind of happy medium. Myopta is one of them. There's, what do they call it? The Myopta Star. That's one of the ones. They're out of Czechoslovakia. They've made good quality glass for years. Steiner, that's another one. GPO. There's that mid-range European stuff that is really, really high, really good quality. Zeiss. Zeiss make both a very, very high end. Leica are a bit past that. Leica are closer to the Swaro. Of course, some of the Leupold is pretty much, its name itself is going to guarantee a good quality scope. And then you get into the other brands. But I always think that, you've got to get that optic right because you can customize a rifle as you go, but that optic doesn't give you a lot of flexibility. You can't buy a 2-10 and improve it to something else. You got to get that right. So, and whilst the rifle and the scope are one component, the binocular, I actually think, is almost as important, if not more important.
You spend a lot more time on the binos than you will looking
through the
scope.
Yeah, you do. And even at closer range, like last week, there was deer in the fog, and I was using the binos to just try and get an image of them. And I got down to 30 meters of these deer last week. Unfortunately, there was a bit of wire in between me and them, so I couldn't take them. There's a boundary line, but it was in that fog, and being able to having good quality glass that let me see into that fog, because with the camera it was just a whiteout, but with the binos you could actually see into it and see the animals, and that's why I have a chest rig, because it means the binos are always there. And even it doesn't have to be at long range. I use binos at all range. If we see, it might be, there is that kind of discovery phase where you use the binos, but there's also, okay, there's an animal, let's look at that animal and find out about it, shot selection, where it's traveling, what it's with. That's where
its friends are.
Hmm?
That's what I find the first one, and then you can go and find the rest.
Well, that's if there's one piece of advice I give to people when they hunt is that when you see the first one, take a breather, because all of a sudden more will appear. You kind of get
That
that
comes
tunnel
with
vision.
experience, Mark.
Yeah,
You know
well,
that.
I've done it more than once. There it is, and then there's that pig. It's there's that 40-kilo pig. I'm going to take it. Next to it is 100. Is the tonner that it's with.
Yeah.
But all you can see is that small one. So that's a different podcast altogether, the approach. But I mean, for gear, that's about it. If you've got your consideration, if you think about what gear suits your purpose, and even if you don't know what your purpose is, don't go out and make rash decisions on gear. Borrow it, talk to people,
Yeah, absolutely.
experiment, make
Especially if you're in a branch, you're in a club, not necessarily just the ADA, but others. Get into your branch, get to know the guys. Most of us have got Facebook forums or various different other, closed chat groups. Ask people what they're doing. I had the situation this week where someone piped up and said, "What pack are you running? Right? What's your advice on packs?" And I told them what I was using, and someone else piped up and said that they're using the same one, and all of a sudden this company's going to get 4 pack orders.
Yeah.
Because people they're interested, and sometimes they just feel dumb asking the question. I don't know why, but ask the question. People are always willing to help.
That's it. And I think that's really, explore that process, but also don't let it get in the way of you having a go.
Sure.
Don't let that, because that's going to be the biggest learning that you'll ever have. When you get there in your first state forest. I mean, I remember that, those first state forest hunts I did. The first time I ever went into Severn, the first hunt I ever did in Severn, basically it was like raining goats. They were just, it was just like, is this it?
Everywhere.
There was just animals, and it was just so exciting, and things were happening all the time. And but what it was dead of winter, and I had a completely inappropriate sleeping bag, and I was freezing cold. So the very first thing, the very next time, I had my hike bag and I had a spare blanket. It was absolutely wrong. So went back. The first real deer hunt I had, the quality binoculars I had at the time just didn't hold up in that kind of in that low light condition. So I thought, okay, I got to get binos. So it was all a learning process. So, but you don't learn that until you actually get in there. So if there's one thing I can stress is have a go. If you got the license, feel confident in yourself and get out there and have a go.
On the last podcast, I suggested that people keep a journal.
Yep.
And that was around where did I see the deer and what were the conditions like and the time of day and all of those sorts of things. I used the same thing to just sort of remind myself about things that aren't working. It's really easy if you just carry a little notebook or something in your pocket, and that boot squeaks, or I've got to remember to sort out the squeak on the right-hand side of my pack, or these socks are terrible. Whatever it is, because by the time you've now got something on the ground, you've butchered it, you've gone back to camp, you've had a bit of a yahoo with your friends and a good time because you've been successful, you've forgotten that stuff. And next time you come back, you'll go, God, I wish I'd only remembered to put spare batteries in my pack this time. Right. Something. The journal will come up more than once because I think they're really important, but that's my
Yeah,
bent
look, I was actually really impressed by your approach. I must admit, I don't put that much. I don't put that much in it. So I actually thought that was really impressive. That I tend to, I suppose I'm far more experiential. I get out there and just absorb it and take it from there. So I mean, if that works for you, that is a really good way of building a picture about a place and understanding it and learning from it, and actually learning about your gear as well.
I learned about it on a podcast probably 5 or 6 years ago.
There you go.
And I actually do it for my young fella, for my son. So each hunt that I go on, I come back and I write a story, and it goes in my hunter's journal. And that's just a story about where I went and what I did. So, at some point in time, you'll pick up that thing and there'll be 100 stories in it for him to read and laugh about and hear about the fact that I was missing him when I was out there hunting and what have you. Now he's coming along, and how exciting that is. He'll get it from my perspective later on, but he might also glean those tips and tricks about when the deer come out under the moonlight and things like that as well. So
sounds a wholly smart idea to me.
I just enjoy it. It's a nice way to reflect after the fact. So yeah. I think that's probably us, Mark.
Yeah, mate, I think we're done. I think that's gear covered. So let's have a quick think about what we want to talk about next week.
Yeah, well, there'll be. We'll make sure that we'll put a list together, and we'll drop a link to the list in here somewhere.
That's
if
a
you've
great
got
idea.
any questions, whatever platform this gets posted on, there'll be a way for you to ask questions and get some more information out of us. So feel free to do that.
Next week, let's talk about hunting a specific location. So let's give some details about hunting a specific location, a specific state forest.
Okay. We'll name that on the day.
Yeah, let's name it on the day.
All right. Well, that's good. Thanks very much again, and we'll catch you on the next one.
You too, buddy. Great talk to you.
All right. Thanks, Mark.